Hello everyone. I'm really glad you're here. Tonight, I want to help you let go of the day and ease into rest. I know many of you use these videos to fall asleep, and it means a lot to be part of your nightly routine. So if you haven't already, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. It truly helps. Now, settle in, close your eyes, and let's begin. Story 1. The interview that never was. I lived in a neighborhood that had its share of shady corners and broken streetlights, the kind of place that constantly walked the line between familiarity and danger. But being young and relatively sheltered, I never thought much of it. I had just finished high school, and up to that point, I'd only ever worked with my mother, helping her clean houses for a living. It was honest work, but I was eager to experience something different, something outside the scope of our quiet domestic world. We didn't have much money, and I knew that if I wanted to go to college, I would have to find a job that paid more and gave me different skills. One evening, my mother and I sat at the dining table, the room dim and warm from the fading sun filtering through our small window, and she handed me the latest copy of our Spanish language newspaper. She knew I often skimmed the job section at the back. This time, however, I was determined to find something that would change the course of my life. As I flipped through the pages, I came across an ad that seemed too good to be true. It was brief, but it spoke directly to me. They were looking for young women, ages 18 to 25, for an open massage position. No experience necessary. Training would be provided. It was located just 3 blocks away from my apartment, a short half-mile walk, and the pay was listed as $500 to $900 a week. My eyes lit up. I could finally help pay for school, contribute more at home, and gain independence. I showed the ad to my mother, brimming with excitement, but she didn't share my enthusiasm. Her eyes scanned the text, her brows furrowed, and she warned me that something didn't feel right. "Call them," she said. "Don't go unless you talk to someone first." Reluctantly, I did. A woman answered the phone, and her voice was gentle, even warm. She told me that they were currently conducting interviews and I could come in to see if I qualified for a second round. I asked questions about the training, the pay, and the location. She answered everything smoothly. She even complimented my interest and said I sounded like a perfect fit. I felt reassured. I told my mother that I planned to go to the interview alone, but she immediately said no. She insisted on coming with me. I remember being so angry, thinking she didn't trust me, thinking she was treating me like a child, when I was just trying to take a step into adulthood. The day of the interview arrived. She drove us in our old family car, the only one we owned. We arrived at the address listed in the ad, but something felt off. The directions had led us to a motel behind a shopping plaza, one that bordered the edge of our neighborhood and always seemed to be cloaked in shadows, even on sunny days. We circled the lot, trying to find a door or sign that looked even remotely like a business. Nothing. My mum, frustrated and silent, told me to call the woman again for clarification. I did, and when she answered, I explained that we were at the motel but couldn't find the room. She gave me a specific room number and said that they were conducting the interviews inside because it was safer than meeting in public. Something about the way she said that made a strange chill run down my spine, but I brushed it off. When I told her that my mother was with me and asked if she could give her the directions directly, her tone changed immediately. That once sweet voice became sharp and angry, laced with panic. "You're with your mother?" she asked, and when I confirmed, there was a long pause, then a click. She hung up. Confused, I called again. Twice. No answer. I was humiliated, annoyed, and disappointed. I had put so much hope into this opportunity. We waited a few minutes, then drove back home in silence. I didn't think much more of it after that, other than a passing sense of confusion and frustration. I told myself that maybe it was just an unprofessional business, or maybe they didn't take me seriously because I didn't show up alone. Life went on. I eventually found another job, one that was less glamorous but far safer. But 3 years later, I was watching the news and nearly dropped the plate I was holding. There was a report about a job scam that had been uncovered. It was a human trafficking ring targeting young girls through job ads in Spanish language newspapers. The ad they displayed on the screen was nearly identical to the one I had answered. My heart stopped. My hands trembled as I dialed my mother's number, and when she picked up, I could barely get the words out. She listened, quiet at first, then softly said, "I knew something wasn't right." I sat on the edge of my bed, overwhelmed with the realization that I had been one wrong decision away from disappearing forever. That innocent job ad could have cost me my life. Or worse. All of my dreams for college, for freedom, for becoming something more than a girl who helped her mother clean houses, could have been swallowed up in a single moment. I cried that night. Not just because I was scared, but because I understood what my mother had done for me. She had protected me, even when I didn't want her to, even when I resented her for being there. I had thought I was grown up, capable of making my own choices, but I didn't understand the dangers that sometimes hid in plain sight. I didn't understand the kind of evil that could disguise itself as a job offer. That day, my mother had sensed what I could not. She had stood firm when I pushed back, had gone with me despite my protests, and had picked up on the red flags I had overlooked. I owed her everything. There's not a day that goes by where I don't think about that phone call, that abrupt change in the woman's voice, that eerie silence that followed her hang-up. Sometimes I replay it in my head, wondering what would have happened if my mother hadn't been there. Would I have walked into that motel room alone? Would I have disappeared like so many others whose stories never made it to the news? I can't say for sure, but I know one thing with absolute certainty. My mother saved my life that day. Her love, her presence, her refusal to let me go alone. Those things that once annoyed me became the very reason I'm still here. I've shared this story with a few friends over the years, but writing it down like this, with all the details, brings a new wave of gratitude and reflection. Sometimes the line between safety and danger is as thin as a phone call, and sometimes it takes a mother's intuition to make sure you never cross it. Story 2. The dorm room and the shadow that lingered. My husband and I first met during our freshman year of college, a time filled with late-night study sessions, whispered conversations under the stars, and the uncertain thrill of youth. We attended one of the oldest universities in our region, more than 200 years old, with ivy-covered stone buildings and echoing halls filled with more than just student footsteps. The campus carried with it a heavy history, one laced with rumors and stories about ghosts, unexplained events, and lingering presences. I had heard whispers from classmates, stories passed down from one dorm room to the next, but I was never one to buy into ghost stories, not until I lived through one myself. By the time we were juniors, my boyfriend, now husband, had secured a single room within a larger suite, which meant we could essentially live together for the rest of the year. As a commuter who had grown tired of the long travel times and missed connections, I was thrilled. Moving into that suite felt like a gift. There was more space, more freedom, and surprisingly more quiet, at least at first. During move-in week, when the building was still mostly empty, I began noticing something odd. While helping him unpack and arrange furniture, I kept catching glimpses of a tall, black shadowy figure out of the corner of my eye. It wasn't a trick of the light or imagination. I would turn, only for the figure to slip just out of view. It never stood still, never lingered long enough to be described fully, but it always hovered near the edges of my perception. At first I brushed it off. We were both exhausted, and my mind could have been playing tricks. But the sightings continued throughout the week. Once, while folding clothes in the hallway outside his room, I felt the distinct sensation of being watched, so intensely that I dropped the shirt I was holding and spun around. Nothing. No footsteps, no movement. Just an overwhelming sense of something standing right behind me. As the semester rolled on, the experiences grew more unsettling. There were strange sounds, scratching, tapping, low thuds, that didn't seem to come from the pipes or walls. Sometimes they sounded like they were coming from the ceiling or the desk drawers. We heard whispers when no one else was around. At first, Jay, my boyfriend, didn't believe me. He said I was letting the campus rumors get to me. But one night, he was alone while I went home for the weekend, and he called me at 2 a.m., his voice shaky. He said he had seen something tall and dark standing at the foot of the bed. When he turned on the light, it was gone. That was the first time he admitted something was wrong. The atmosphere in that room changed after that. It wasn't just spooky, it was suffocating. If either of us was alone, it felt like someone else had entered the room, breathing heavily down our necks but never making a sound. Then came the sleep talking. At first, Jay would mumble in his sleep, garbled phrases I couldn't understand. Then the tone changed. His voice became forceful, guttural, like he was speaking in a language I didn't know. It wasn't like any sleep talking I had heard before. There was a rhythm to it, an intensity that felt wrong. One night, I woke up to find Jay sitting upright in bed, his eyes wide open, whispering in that same foreign tongue. I called his name. He didn't respond. I reached for him, and he slowly turned to look at me, expressionless. A few seconds later, he lay back down and fell asleep. The following morning, he didn't remember anything. I tried to laugh it off, telling myself it was just stress, but deep down, I knew that something unnatural had attached it to that place, and maybe to him. The scariest night of all was when I woke up with him straddling me. It wasn't playful or romantic. His hands were planted firmly beside my head, eyes staring unblinking into mine, as if trying to peer into my soul. At first I thought he was awake. I whispered his name, then said it louder. No response. I reached up and gently touched his arm, but he didn't move. For minutes he hovered like that, unmoving. I couldn't even tell if he was breathing. Finally, without a word, he climbed it off me, walked to the corner of the room, pulled out the desk chair, turned it to face him, and circled it 3 times. He then stood there, silently, for a full minute, staring into the seat like something was sitting there. Then he walked back to bed, lay down, and instantly fell asleep. I lay there frozen, unable to process what had just happened. The next morning, I told him everything. He looked horrified. He had no memory of the incident and was deeply disturbed by what I described. That was the turning point. We decided to cleanse the space. With the help of a friend who was into spiritual cleansing, we burned sage, read protective verses, and said prayers. We moved furniture, opened windows, and begged whatever it was to leave. And it worked for the most part. The atmosphere felt lighter. The strange noises faded. Jay still talked in his sleep now and then, but the intensity was gone. The dark figure no longer lingered in the corners. We finished out the school year and eventually graduated, moving into a new place where everything has been peaceful since. Jay hasn't sleepwalked or talked in his sleep once since we left. Now, years later, I look back on those days with a mixture of dread and disbelief. That dorm building was more than just old bricks and creaky floorboards. Something haunted it, something that wasn't content to stay hidden. It wanted to be felt, noticed, remembered. Sometimes I wonder if it needed a voice, and found one in Jay. I'll never fully understand what happened in that suite, and I'm not sure I want to. But what I do know is that environment matters. Spaces carry memories, some too old to understand, some too dark to name. And sometimes, when you stay too long in a space like that, the space begins to stay with you. Even though the events feel distant now, and we've moved on to a new chapter in life, I find myself remembering the shadow in the corner of the room, the cold air that would suddenly press against my back, the way my heart would race for no reason at all. I still have dreams of Jay speaking in that strange voice, of him circling that chair again and again while I lay frozen in bed. But when I wake, I remind myself that it's over, that we're safe, that the past is the past. And yet, on some quiet nights, when the wind hits the windows just right, I wonder if that old presence remembers us too. Story 3. The Yellow Cab and the Stranger in Blue. I want to start by saying that I'm not someone who usually gets out much. I'm a stay-at-home mother, living in a quiet, small town where everyone more or less knows everyone else. My family is far away, and I try not to bother them, unless it's truly necessary. That evening had started off like any other. After tucking in my eldest child for the night, and giving our neighbor's cat her usual treats, a new nightly ritual I'd taken on, I was just about to settle in for a bit of rest when my husband made a joking comment about wanting corn dogs from 7-Eleven. It was harmless, light-hearted. I smiled. We needed milk anyway, so I said I'd head out, A quick trip, I thought. Nothing out of the ordinary. But sometimes the nights that begin in the most mundane ways unfold into memories you carry forever. The neighbor's cat was her usual sassy self, swatting at me as I gave her some treats. One sharp claw caught the edge of my finger and left a small, painful nick. I winced, muttered under my breath, and decided to cut my visit short. I left her with a final pat and headed towards 7-Eleven. It was just after 9 p.m. when I pulled up to the store. The parking lot was well lit, with long, uninterrupted windows that stretched along the front of the building. As I parked alongside the sidewalk, I noticed a man in blue standing nearby. He didn't seem to be doing anything alarming, just standing. I didn't think much of it. I stayed in my car for a moment longer than usual, trying to cradle my sore finger and gather my thoughts. It was then that I heard a mumble through my partially open window, a low male voice saying something I couldn't quite catch. When I looked up again, he was walking toward my passenger side door. I felt a flash of unease as he reached for the handle. Thankfully, my passenger door handle had been broken by my kids years ago, and it couldn't be opened from the outside. He tugged and pulled, then looked confused when it wouldn't budge. I opened my own door slightly, stepped halfway out of the car, and asked firmly, "Excuse me, what are you doing?" He didn't answer at first, then repeated over and over, "Are you the yellow cab?" His voice was soft, like he wasn't fully aware of what he was saying. "No," I said. "I'm not a cab." "I don't know you." He glanced around and must have realized people inside the store were watching. Without another word, he turned and started walking away. I quickly gathered myself and hurried inside. My heart was racing. I tried to laugh it off. Maybe he really had mistaken me for a cab, I told myself. Our town doesn't have a formal taxi system. It's mostly random people with cars. Still, I found myself circling the aisles inside, trying to spot him through the glass, making sure he wasn't anywhere near my car. At one point, I saw him walking away down the sidewalk. I called my husband and gave him a brief rundown. He told me not to worry too much, that it probably was a case of mistaken identity. I told him I'd be home soon and made my way to the counter with corn dogs and milk in hand. As I stepped outside, the wind had picked up, and a strange tension hung in the air. I was hyper-aware, the kind of awareness that tingles across your skin when your instincts whisper that something's not right. As I approached my car, I caught sight of him again. Only now, he had something slung over his shoulder. It was my son's backpack. I froze. It was unmistakable, even in the dim light. But the light, patch, the little buttons he loved, the scuffed edges, that backpack had been inside my car. My heart skipped. I hadn't locked the doors when I ran inside, and somehow he'd gotten in and taken it. I don't know what came over me, but I stepped forward, only a couple of feet from the car, and shouted, "That's my son's backpack." I expected him to run. Instead, he turned and began walking toward me, repeating the same phrase as before. "Are you the yellow cab?" he said again, as if it were a mantra he couldn't let go of. "Give me back the backpack." I yelled. I wasn't angry, I was terrified. There was something so off about him, not just his behavior, but the way his eyes looked blank, the way his tone was too casual for what was happening. As he kept approaching, I memorized his outfit. Pale hospital blue pajama pants, a vivid blue hoodie with a circular symbol on it, something that looked almost like a globe or a digital logo. His appearance stuck with me. His face was gaunt, his skin pale and marked with small scabs. I couldn't tell if it was illness, addiction, or something else, but something deep inside me screamed that this wasn't just a confused man. This was someone whose grip on reality was slipping in a dangerous way. Eventually he turned and walked off again. I rushed inside and told the clerks. We were all confused, unsure of what to do next. For a second I debated letting it go. It was just a backpack. But then I remembered him trying to get into the car while I was still in it, and something about that stuck with me in a way I couldn't ignore. I called the police. As I spoke with the officer, I spotted him again, walking slowly just up the road. I kept my distance but followed, giving them his location. At one point he turned back, saw me, and began walking toward my car again. I panicked and drove off, relaying everything to the officer. My heart was thudding in my chest. I didn't know what I was doing, Part of me felt foolish, but another part knew that this couldn't just be brushed off. I had children. This man had tried to get into my car. He had stolen from me. Something was wrong, and I wasn't going to pretend it wasn't. Eventually, the police called back. They had found him. According to the officer, he was severely intoxicated. When they arrived, lights flashing, he asked them, "Are you the yellow cab?" Just like he had with me. That phrase, it lingered in my mind, echoing like some broken record from a deeper, darker place. Afterward, I sat at my kitchen table, holding my son's backpack in my lap. Everything was there, his snacks, his books, his little drawings. I was relieved it had come back to me, but I couldn't shake the unease. Was he just drunk? Was it mental illness? Or had he been trying to use yellow cab as some excuse? A way to pretend his actions were harmless when they weren't? I'll never know. What I do know is that I won't forget the feeling of that moment, standing under the store lights, facing down a stranger whose eyes didn't seem to see me at all. I don't know what he wanted, or what could have happened if that door hadn't been broken, if I hadn't yelled, if I had brushed it all off, but I'm glad I didn't. Even when you live in a small town, and you think nothing ever happens, sometimes danger wears a hoodie, speaks in loops, and waits for someone like you to unlock their car. Now, every time I go out at night, even if it's just for milk or something as simple as corn dogs, I check the locks 3 times. I carry a little more awareness with me, a cautious lens that makes the world feel different. That night changed me in ways I didn't expect. It made me grateful for instincts, for broken door handles, for the simple act of noticing something that felt off. I don't know who that man really was, or what his life was like. I hope somewhere he finds peace and help, but I also know that what he did was not okay. He crossed a line, and I'll never forget it. Sometimes, the monsters don't wear masks. Sometimes they mumble softly in the dark, asking questions that don't make sense, and sometimes they wait right outside your door. Story 4. Emily, the girl in the water. It all started during the summer of 2007. I was 9 years old, and my best friend Hannah was 8. Every year, her parents would take us up to a remote campsite in northern Ontario, nestled near the quiet edge of a large lake, surrounded by thick forest and open skies. The campground was scattered with cozy little cottages and trailers, creating a modest yet charming summer community. Each year, the same families would return, and we'd reconnect with the friends we had made in previous summers. It felt safe, like our own secret world tucked away from everything else. We'd play all day, swim, tell stories, roast marshmallows, and run around until our legs gave out. But that particular year, something was different, something subtle at first, like a change in the air. That was the summer we met Emily. She was our age, pale with shoulder-length brown hair, bright green eyes, and a soft, almost whispery voice. At first, she seemed shy and reserved, but we quickly warmed up to each other. Emily started hanging out with us nearly every day, though she never stayed too late, and she never joined us for dinner or sleepovers. She always said her parents were strict and didn't want her out after dark. We accepted that, never really questioning it. We had fun when she was around, laughing, swimming, taking photos together, and sharing secrets only young girls could understand. Looking back now, I remember how she always appeared at just the right time, often without us seeing where she came from. She'd just be there, as if stepping out of the trees or gliding in with the wind. One day, we were all swimming at the lake. There was a floating dock anchored a little ways from shore, complete with a small slide. We'd climb up, take turns plunging into the water, and then race to see who could make the biggest splash. When it was my turn, I slid down with excitement, but as soon as I hit the water, something went terribly wrong. I found myself caught beneath the dock, unable to surface. In the blur of bubbles and panic, I felt hands, small but strong, grabbing my arms and holding me under. I kicked and thrashed, but the grip didn't let up. I remember the dark shape of Emily above me, her face expressionless, her hands locked tight. Just when I thought I wouldn't make it, Hannah's hand reached into the water and yanked me up. I came up coughing and gasping, confused and terrified. Emily climbed onto the dock like nothing had happened. She said nothing about it, and neither did we. We never talked about that moment aloud. Not that day. Not even when we got back to the camp. Something about it felt unreal. Like a dream you can't quite explain. But we couldn't look at Emily the same way. The next day was our last at the campsite. Emily came by early, smiling and acting as if everything was normal. She kept trying to convince us to follow her to a spot she'd found by the river. "There's a huge old building at the end of the path," she said. "It's amazing. We could spend our last day exploring it together." Her voice was sweet, but there was something strange in her eyes. Something urging, something not quite right. Hannah and I looked at each other and quietly agreed that we shouldn't go. We gave her excuses, told her we needed to help pack. She looked disappointed but didn't argue. That was the last time we saw Emily. The next summer she wasn't there. When we asked around, no one seemed to know who she was. The other kids had no memory of her. The adults gave us puzzled looks. When we asked Hannah's mum, she paused for a moment, then said, "Was Emily one of your imaginary friends?" We laughed nervously and said no. Absolutely not. She had been real. We had photos with her. But that night, when we went through our old camp pictures, specifically the ones from 2007, Emily wasn't in a single one, not even the group photos. And yet, in every picture where we remembered her being, there was space, like we had left room for someone. Empty space between Hannah and me, like a ghost had stood beside us and refused to show up in the frame. That discovery chilled us both. We decided, without speaking, to each write down everything we remembered about Emily, her appearance, her voice, her habits. When we compared notes, they were nearly identical. Green eyes, brown hair to the shoulders, pale skin, very skinny, always quiet, always disappearing just before dinner. We both remembered the same moments, the same stories, even the same odd way she would glance toward the woods when we asked her questions. But if she wasn't in the pictures, who had we been talking to? And then the memory hit me. The dock, the way she had held me under. Not playfully, but forcefully. It hadn't felt like a game. It had felt like something else. Something colder, something calculated. We both remembered it vividly, and yet there was no proof. No scratches. No photos. Just the memory. Years passed, but Emily never left our minds. One evening, long after we had both turned 18, we began reading about the Borwash district, where the campsite was located. We stumbled upon articles and forum posts about an old prison that used to operate in the area, now long abandoned. People had reported strange sightings there, apparitions, strange voices by the river, and ghostly figures of children. One post described a girl who had been seen walking near the river alone, pale and silent, trying to lead hikers toward the prison ruins. Another mentioned a little girl who had drowned in the lake decades ago, her body never found. As we read, chills crept up our spines. Was that where Emily had wanted to take us? Was that the building she mentioned? And why had she tried to pull me under the dock? A year after that conversation, driven by curiosity and a need for closure, we visited the old prison site. We brought flashlights and a camera. We didn't see anything that night, not really, but the silence was unnerving. The trees creaked like they were whispering, and the river beside the path seemed to rush faster as we walked. At one point, Hannah froze, staring at the tree line. "Do you hear that?" she asked. I didn't hear anything, but I felt it. That same cold sensation I had felt all those years ago in the lake. A presence. Something watching us. We didn't stay long. We left, holding hands like we used to as children, and even though we didn't see Emily, we knew she had been there. We still don't know who or what Emily was. A spirit? A memory? A shadow trapped in time? What we do know is that we both saw her. We both remember her voice, her face, her laugh. We both remember that moment under the dock. It wasn't just in our heads. And as strange as it sounds, we both believe she wanted us to follow her. Where, we still don't know. Perhaps she had been alone too long. Perhaps she was trying to bring someone with her into that forgotten place, down the river, toward the crumbling prison. Whatever the case, we didn't go. We didn't follow. But we almost did. And sometimes, when I close my eyes and listen to the quiet, I still hear her whispering my name from beneath the water. Story 5. The creature on the road. It happened about 5 years ago, but the memory still haunts me in ways that no logical explanation can fix. My best friend and I were on our way to a buddy's house to catch a UFC fight. We were in good spirits, talking nonsense, the kind of excited chatter that makes time pass without notice. As was our custom, we stopped by a nearby store to grab a case of beer. We were driving his pickup truck, a lifted one with oversized 24-inch rims that made you feel like you were perched above the world. It was a neighborhood we both knew well, one of those areas with winding streets and short cornered turns. We missed the street we needed, but instead of looping back, we decided to just follow the connecting roads to circle around. It wasn't a big deal, or at least that's what we thought and damn. The sun had dipped just below the horizon, and the sky had turned into a dark velvet blanket, stars just beginning to peek through. I remember staring at a scratch-off lottery ticket, absent-mindedly checking if I'd won, when my friend suddenly slowed the truck. "Hey," he said, nodding ahead. "Someone's husky is just sitting in the road." I looked up, expecting to see a fluffy, confused dog, but what I saw was not that. Not even close. Whatever it was too big. Its silhouette was broad and tall, and it sat in the dead center of the road like it owned it. My heart immediately started to beat faster. My friend flicked on his high beams, hoping to encourage the animal, whatever it was, to move along. But that decision, small as it seemed, triggered something I'll never forget. The light hit the creature fully now, casting it in detail we hadn't expected. It stood slowly, almost fluidly, like someone uncoiling from a crouch, and then it turned its head. I swear to you, and I will swear to anyone who asks, the face was human. Not entirely, but enough to freeze every rational part of me. It had a mouth, a nose, and two dark, intelligent eyes. The skin was stretched and pale, thin like old paper. We could make out its features clearly in the glow of the high beams. My friend stopped breathing for a second, and I felt my entire body go cold. Then, without warning, the creature spread its wings, massive bat-like things that stretched impossibly wide, and took off into the air with a grace that didn't make sense for something that large. There was no sound, no wind, no rustling, not even the expected whoosh of air you'd hear from flapping wings. It was just gone, like a silent cut from one scene to another. We sat there, in the middle of the road, stunned. Neither of us spoke. I slowly looked at him, and he looked at me, both of us wearing the same expression, a mix of awe, terror, and confusion. We pulled the truck over and sat in silence for a few minutes, trying to make sense of what had just happened. He asked me if I saw what he saw. I nodded. "That wasn't a dog," he said. "Not even close. It had a face," I whispered, barely able to process it. It had a human face, and those wings, enormous, silent, alive. When we got to our friend's house, we told the story. We went over every detail, every inch of what we'd seen. They laughed. Of course they did. Who wouldn't? A winged humanoid with a face like a person. It sounded like a campfire story or a sleep-deprived hallucination. But the thing is, we both saw it. We both described it the exact same way without comparing notes first. The same features, the same wings, the same way it stared at us before lifting into the sky without a sound. And the silence, that was the part that disturbed me the most. How something so big, so physically imposing, could leave without a single trace. No rustle of air, no whoosh, not even a displaced leaf. That night I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw it rising into the air, its head turning slowly in our direction like it was studying us, judging us. Maybe it had been waiting for us to stop. Maybe it had been curious, or maybe it had just wanted to be seen. I kept wondering why it was there, sitting in the middle of a residential road, of all places, and why didn't it react with fear? It didn't run. It didn't flinch. It stared directly at us, as though it had been expecting us. I tried looking up cryptid sightings online. I found stories about Mothman, skinwalkers, shapeshifters. Some resembled what we saw. Most didn't. None provided peace of mind. Weeks passed, then months. We never saw it again, but that moment became a private bond between me and my friend. We didn't talk about it much, Not because we didn't believe it, but because talking about it brought back that sick, weightless feeling, the moment when reality seemed to twist, where you're no longer sure what the rules are. Eventually, we stopped telling the story to others, tired of the laughter and the disbelief, but we never doubted each other. You can't erase something like that once it's burned into your memory. That night on the road redefined what I thought was possible. It opened a crack in my understanding of the world, a quiet, haunting reminder that we don't know everything that walks beneath our stars. Even now, when I drive at night and see something in the road ahead, I tense up. I remember the way the creature slowly unfolded, the way its face caught the light, the way its wings blocked out the stars. I've tried drawing it before, tried putting what we saw on paper, but no sketch can capture the quiet horror of that moment. No outline can recreate the feeling of meeting something that should not exist. People believe in monsters, angels, demons, but what we saw didn't fit any of those categories. It was something other, and it stared at us like we were the ones who didn't belong. If someone else had told me this story, I probably wouldn't believe them either. I'd smile politely, listen to the tale, and then dismiss it as a trick of the light or a shared hallucination. But I was there. I saw the eyes, the skin, the wings. I felt the air go still, and I will never forget it. Some things aren't meant to be understood. Some things exist in the spaces between what we believe and what we fear. And on that quiet suburban road, beneath the pale glow of our high beams, we found one of them. Story 6. The Basement Bathroom. It was the summer of 1984, and I was 12 years old, enjoying the kind of free, meandering days that only come when school's out and the weather is warm. My mother had gone out for a short errand, promising she'd be back in about half an hour. I didn't think much of it. I had the house to myself, and with the warm breeze floating through the windows and the sunlight casting golden stripes on the floor, everything felt still and peaceful. After a few minutes, I realized I needed to use the bathroom. I started toward the one upstairs, the normal one we all used, but quickly remembered I had left my Archie comic in the downstairs bathroom earlier that morning. I didn't want to leave it there, and I figured I could grab it and be back upstairs before I really needed to go. But sometimes life and fear don't give you that luxury. Our downstairs bathroom was in the basement. Small, cramped, cold, and tucked into the far end of a space I never liked being in. It always felt just a little too quiet down there, like sound itself didn't know how to settle. I hated the feeling, but I told myself I'd just run in, grab my comic, and be out before the darkness behind me even caught up. But by the time I reached the bathroom, the need to go had become urgent. I sighed, deciding I'd just use it and get out quickly. I slipped inside, locked the small hook on the inside of the door, a lock that was more symbolic than effective, and tried to settle in, keeping my eyes on the pages of Archie and Jughead to distract myself from how much I hated that space. The room was barely large enough to turn around in. When I sat on the toilet, my knee nearly touched the corner of the sink. I could reach the door handle from where I sat and stretch my hand just far enough to touch the opposing wall. The space felt like a closet, with old tile, a faint musty smell, and a single dim light overhead. The only thing separating me from the rest of the basement was that thin wooden door and the simple metal hook keeping it closed. And then I heard it, a faint sound above me, not like the creaks of a settling house, but footsteps, heavy, deliberate, and close. My breath caught in my throat. My mum wasn't supposed to be home for another 20 minutes. The footsteps grew louder, slow and deliberate. I counted them without meaning to. 1, 2, 3. I knew the stairs to the basement well. There were 16 in total. Each thump echoed like a drumbeat. By the time the count reached 10, I wasn't reading my comic anymore. I was frozen, eyes wide, listening so intently I could hear the hairs rising on my neck. Then came the sound I still remember with bone-deep clarity, a rush of wind, and a layered sound that could only be described as laughter. Not human laughter, not even the kind you hear in horror films. It was disjointed, multi-tonal, like voices tangled together, calling and echoing down the hall. It was approaching the bathroom door. I heard it round the corner, felt it move down the hallway. Then the doorknob jiggled, slowly at first, then with force. My heart exploded in my chest. I was locked in this tiny room, sitting vulnerable and cornered, and something was trying to get in. I grabbed the handle with both hands, holding it tight. The metal hook above it strained and bent under the pressure from the other side. The entire door shook, and the knob turned violently. I screamed, not just out of fear, but out of pure animalistic panic. I held on, tears streaming down my face, every nerve in my body pleading for this nightmare to end. Whatever was on the other side wanted in, and it wasn't going to knock politely. Time became a blur. I don't know how long I held that door. It felt like hours. It could have been seconds. The struggle between me and that unseen force was a test of willpower and sheer desperation. My voice grew hoarse from screaming. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, it stopped. The laughter vanished. The air stilled. The door went silent. There was no retreating sound, no footsteps, just a cold void on the other side of the wood, and me, still clutching the knob like it was a lifeline. I didn't let go. Not yet. I didn't dare. I sat in that locked bathroom, shaking, eyes on the door, breath shallow, waiting for my mother to come home and rescue me from whatever had tried to reach through that door. Eventually I heard her voice, her familiar footsteps above me. I called out to her, begging her to come down. She rushed to the basement, alarmed by the sound of my cries. I heard her ask if I was okay, and I told her I'd come out in a minute. I cleaned myself up, still trembling, and unlocked the hook with shaking fingers. When I opened the door, she was standing there, worry etched across her face. I threw myself into her arms, crying uncontrollably, trying to tell her what had happened. She held me close, but then gently pulled away, looking into my face with confusion. "What's your blood sugar?" she asked. I blinked. "What?" I said. "Have you checked your blood sugar recently?" she asked again. You see, I'd been diagnosed with type 1 diabetes 2 years before, and while I was responsible, my parents still checked in often. She thought maybe I had hallucinated the whole thing. Maybe it was low blood sugar. Maybe I had imagined the sounds, the struggle, the door rattling like it was going to fly off its hinges. I checked. My blood sugar was fine, but she still didn't believe me. That was the hardest part, perhaps, the realization that no one else would ever fully understand what I went through in that basement bathroom. I knew what I had heard, what I had felt, what I had fought against, and nothing could convince me otherwise. It wasn't in my head. It wasn't a trick of blood chemistry or a dream brought on by shadows. Years passed, and I tried to forget it. But strange things continued to happen, even if they were less intense. Footsteps where there should be none. Laughter in the night. Doors rattling just slightly without cause. Eventually my mother came to believe me. Not just about that day, but about other strange occurrences that followed. Sometimes belief is born not from one story, but from many. I'm older now, and we no longer live in that house, but I still remember that summer day like it happened yesterday. I remember the comic book slipping from my hand. I remember the hook on the door bending. I remember the laughter, and I remember holding on with everything I had, not knowing what waited on the other side. Story 7. Bones in the Cornfield. It was the summer of 2018, one of those glowing July days that started with nothing in particular planned. My cousin and I had always been close, both of us living just outside of Detroit, sharing an obsession with photography and long drives. That day, we decided to hop in the car and take a spontaneous road trip. Just the two of us, the windows down, music blaring, no destination in mind. We ended up in a quiet rural town, the kind of place that seemed frozen in time, where buildings stood silent in the heat and cornfields stretched endlessly into the distance. As we drove past what looked like a derelict barn, the faded red wood catching the light just right, we locked eyes and immediately agreed. We had to check it out. The barn itself looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. The paint was peeling in great sun-bleached flakes, but the structure still seemed solid. As urban explorers, we'd seen far worse. What intrigued us wasn't just the aesthetic, but the eerie stillness around it, like the world had forgotten it was even there. We parked nearby, hopped the short fence, and approached. The creaking door gave way easily, revealing a surprisingly intact interior. Light streamed in through gaps in the wooden slats, casting long, shifting shadows across the floor. We wandered through the room slowly, snapping pictures, taking in the smell of dust and dry wood, until we found a set of stairs that led down to a basement level. It felt colder as we descended, and the air grew heavier, damper. The basement hit us with a feeling right away, an unsettling, gut-level unease that neither of us could explain. The space was cluttered with children's toys, small furniture, and tiny clothes, all coated in grime. Dolls with missing limbs sat in corners. A cracked crib leaned against one wall. It felt like stepping into someone's forgotten life, or a scene that had never been meant to be revisited. My cousin and I exchanged nervous glances but didn't speak. We were experienced explorers, but this was different. We didn't stay long down there. The air felt wrong, too heavy to breathe, and the silence had a pulse to it, like the room was listening. We climbed back up and exited into the sunlight again, glad for the warmth on our skin. Behind the barn was a cornfield, tall, dense, golden, the kind that whispers to you with each gust of wind. We thought it would be fun to take some Lost in the Corn shots, a classic rustic look. I took the lead, walking between the stalks, my camera slung around my neck, my cousin just a few steps behind. That's when I saw it. A vertebra, half buried in the dirt between rows. Small, but not small enough to ignore. At first I assumed it was an animal. Maybe a deer, maybe a cow. But something about it felt too human. I crouched down, brushing the dirt away, revealing more bones scattered nearby. I called for my cousin, her footsteps crunching quickly through the corn, and when she arrived, her face went pale. We began searching the immediate area, slowly, cautiously. With each step, we uncovered more, long bones, a fibula, even a femur, all unnervingly intact. I had taken human anatomy courses in college, and I knew what I was seeing. These weren't the scattered remains of roadkill. This was human. And there wasn't just one. There were fragments in multiple directions, like someone had discarded more than one body in this field, letting time and nature conceal the evidence. We both stopped speaking. The weight of the discovery sank in like a lead blanket. This wasn't just creepy anymore. It was criminal. We looked at each other, silently deciding what to do next. Then we did the only thing we could. We called the police. Waiting for them felt like forever. We sat in the car with the windows cracked, watching the cornfield sway gently as if nothing had happened. When the officers finally arrived, just two of them at first, they were polite but skeptical. They assumed, as many would, that we had found animal bones. They asked the usual questions, checked our IDs, and walked with us back to the spot. That changed the moment they saw the rib cage I uncovered from a nearby trash pile behind the barn. Suddenly their demeanor shifted. Radios crackled. They told us to leave the area and said that a full forensic team was on the way. We nodded, quietly gathering our things, too numb to feel anything but a low, rising nausea. As we drove away, neither of us spoke for miles. The day had started as a photo adventure, a carefree summer escape, but it had turned into something else entirely, a scene we were never supposed to find. That night, I stayed up scrolling through news reports, waiting to see if anything came of it. Weeks passed. No headlines, no investigations, no press conferences. It was like it never happened. We had given our statements, our names, our contact information, but we were never called back. It was as if the field swallowed not just the bones, but the truth itself. And that, somehow, was the most disturbing part of all. Since that day, I haven't returned to that area. I don't think I ever could. The photos we took were deleted, not because we wanted to forget, because we couldn't bear to look at them. I sometimes wonder who those bones belong to. A runaway? A missing person never found? Someone discarded like trash and buried in anonymity beneath the corn? The lack of closure gnaws at me. Sometimes, in the quiet hours of the night, I close my eyes and see that vertebra again, sitting alone in the dirt, like a warning sign missed too long ago, and I wonder what else is buried out there, waiting. I've never told many people about that day. It's hard to explain what it feels like to stumble across a secret the earth tried to keep, but I've never forgotten it, and I never will. That field is still out there. That barn is still standing, and somewhere beneath the roots and soil, stories remain, unspoken, unfinished. Some things hide in plain sight, wrapped in silence, waiting for someone to notice. And on that day, for a moment, the field allowed itself to be seen. Story 8. The breathing outside the tent. I was 13 at the time, just old enough to feel invincible, young enough to believe in harmless mischief, and completely unaware that some jokes awaken more than just laughter. My friend and I, two girls full of endless curiosity and late-night energy, had been given the rare and exhilarating privilege of sleeping outside in a tent in her backyard. We lived in a rural area with a wide-open paddock behind her property, fields that stretched into the dark and quiet horizon. We brought snacks, flashlights, and whispered stories about school, sports, and the kind of daydreams that lie at the edge of adolescence. It was late, but neither of us was tired. The night was still and heavy with summer warmth. We were just beginning to settle into the sleeping bags when a mischievous idea flickered in my mind. In an attempt to be funny, I leaned toward my friend and whispered, "Do you hear that? It sounds like someone's breathing outside." I meant it as a joke, just a little spark to make things more exciting. I expected her to roll her eyes, maybe call me dramatic, but instead, her expression changed. She froze. Her mouth parted slightly, and her eyes locked onto mine, not with amusement, but with fear. I laughed, awkwardly at first, trying to dispel the tension. "I'm kidding," I said, but she didn't move. She leaned closer to the tent wall, her face pale in the moonlight, and mouthed, "I can hear it too." That's when the joke stopped being funny. There was indeed breathing. Heavy, ragged, deliberate. The kind of sound that doesn't belong to an animal or the wind, but to a person trying not to be noticed. We didn't move. We didn't speak. We just listened. The breathing started to move around the tent, slow and steady, like someone circling us, and then we heard footsteps. Careful, quiet, as if they were trying not to make a sound but failing, ever so slightly. The grass shifted. The earth pressed under a weight that was very much human. We sat there in absolute silence, our hands gripping each other's as our pulses hammered in sync. I couldn't process what was happening. I kept trying to convince myself that it was just my imagination running wild, but I could feel the ground tremble beneath me. The breathing stopped. Then, in an instant, the footsteps sprinted away, quick and erratic, disappearing behind the tent and into the open paddock. For a moment, all was quiet again, as if the world had taken a deep breath and was waiting to see what we would do. Then, just over the rise of the hill, we saw a faint glow, red and blue lights moving up the long driveway. At first we thought it might be her dad. He was a police officer, after all, and maybe he was checking on us. But the lights were strange, flashing where they shouldn't, too quiet for a patrol car, too early for coincidence. We didn't stop to ask questions. We ran. The paddock was wide, at least 600 meters of rough grass between the tent and the driveway. Our feet pounded the earth, hearts racing, lungs burning. We reached the flashing lights to find an officer standing beside his car, and for a second, I remember feeling safe. Then her dad came rushing out of the house, confused, asking why a cop was parked at their property, and why we weren't in the tent. The explanation came quickly, like a wave of realization that none of us were prepared for. The man had stolen a car nearby, and had been fleeing through people's backyards, trying to stay hidden from law enforcement. He had been spotted in the area hours before, and now he was here, lurking near a tent where two young girls lay wide awake, unaware that danger was less than a canvas wall away. I couldn't believe it. I had joked about someone being outside, only for it to become horrifyingly real. The odds felt impossible, like something out of a nightmare where your thoughts conjure reality. I kept thinking about what would have happened if we hadn't joked, if we had fallen asleep early, if the police hadn't arrived when they did. The fact that we heard the breathing at all seemed like some small miracle, like our instincts had stirred just in time. I don't think I slept much the rest of that summer. Every sound became something to question. Every whisper of the wind sounded like footsteps. That tent never felt like a safe space again. Something about knowing how thin that barrier truly is. It changes you. In the days that followed, we learned more about the man. He had broken into several properties and was considered dangerous. No one knew what his intentions were that night. But I've always believed he was about to unzip that tent. Maybe he thought we were alone. Maybe he didn't care. The silence around that idea, the part of the story we never got to finish, is what haunts me most. What if we hadn't run? What if we hadn't heard the breathing? What if I hadn't made that stupid joke that somehow turned out to be the truth? I've carried those questions for years, tucked away like fragile glass in the back of my mind. Now, as an adult, I still find myself waking up sometimes to the imagined sound of breathing just outside my window. I remind myself I'm safe, that the doors are locked, that no one is out there. But the truth is, once you've felt that kind of fear, that silent, creeping, unexplainable terror, it never really leaves you. It curls up somewhere deep inside and stays quiet until the world goes still again. And sometimes, on quiet nights, I think back to the tent, the footsteps, the breath in the dark, and wonder if something out there is still looking for silence to break. Story 9. The Whispering Tree Line. It was the kind of October evening that settles deep into your skin, the air cool and still, the sky smeared in soft twilight, and the world slowly curling in on itself before winter. I was driving home from work, the long country road winding through thick patches of woods and silent stretches of farmland. There were no streetlights here, just the distant blink of a farmhouse light or the flicker of a barn lantern in the distance. I'd taken this road hundreds of times, so many that I often drove it on autopilot, barely thinking about each turn. But on that particular night, something made me take the long way. Maybe it was the calm, or the quiet thrill of having time to myself, or the way the trees looked that evening, golden and burnt orange, framing the road like a fading dream. As I made my way deeper into the stretch of trees that lined both sides of the road, my headlights caught movement along the right-hand side. It wasn't a deer or some animal darting across the road. It was too slow, too deliberate. At first I thought it was a person, someone walking just beyond the ditch, keeping pace with my car. But that didn't make sense. There was no sidewalk, no shoulder, and no reason for someone to be out here at dusk, walking through waist-high grass and thickets of trees. Still, the figure kept appearing just within the edge of my vision, always near the tree line, never quite stepping into the open. I slowed down, just slightly, trying to get a better look. When I glanced again, I saw what looked like a pale face, too pale for the fading light, peeking from behind a tree. It wasn't looking at my car. It was looking straight at me. I flinched, instinctively pressing harder on the gas. The car sped up, the trees whipping by faster now, but my eyes were glued to the side mirror. There was nothing there. Just a quiet road and the shadows stretching longer behind me. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was a trick of the light, or maybe just my own exhaustion playing games. But something in my chest stayed tight, like my body knew something my mind didn't want to accept. A few miles ahead I came to a familiar pull-off spot, a gravel patch where hunters sometimes parked, or where people stopped to rest during long drives. I felt an odd compulsion to stop. Not fear, not even curiosity. Just a still, humming sense that something needed to be seen. I pulled over, turned off the engine, and sat there in the growing dark. The woods to the right of the car were dense, filled with brittle leaves and tall, straight trunks that climbed into the dusky sky. I rolled the window down and listened. At first, all I could hear was the soft rustling of leaves, but then I heard it. A voice, or rather a whisper. My name. I froze. It came from the tree line, maybe 30 feet away. A slow, deliberate whisper, like someone dragging my name across their tongue. Then it came again, closer. Come here. The words were breathy, feminine, but hollow, like something trying to sound human and failing just slightly. I sat there, unmoving, heart pounding so loud I thought it might drown out the sound. And then I saw her, or it, a woman, or the suggestion of one, standing among the trees. She was tall, impossibly thin, with hair that seemed to shift with the shadows. Her face was wrong, not grotesque, but unfinished, like a painting smudged at the edges. She didn't move, didn't blink, just stood there waiting. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to drive, but I couldn't. Not yet. Something in her eyes, or where her eyes should have been, held me there. She lifted one arm, long and sharp at the joints, and pointed toward the trees behind her. "It's quiet here," she whispered. "No one will hear you." That broke the spell. I turned the key in the ignition with trembling hands, the engine roaring back to life, and peeled away from that gravel patch with my tires kicking up dust and loose stones behind me. I didn't look back. I didn't check the mirrors. I just drove, the weight in my chest slowly easing with every mile that passed between me and that haunted tree line. When I got home, I locked the doors and turned on every light in the house. I didn't tell anyone what I saw. I wasn't ready to explain something I didn't understand. But I kept thinking about that whisper, the way it knew my name, the way it beckoned without moving. I tried to forget. I buried the memory under work, music, movies, and distraction. But weeks later, I started having dreams, always about the same road, always with the same voice calling me back, and always ending with that moment where I pull over. Only this time in the dream, I step out of the car. I haven't taken that road since. I drive the longer route now, adding 20 extra minutes to every trip. People ask why, and I laugh it off, saying it's just a nicer drive or that I'm avoiding construction. But the truth is simpler and far darker. I know that if I go back, she'll still be there, standing just inside the woods, waiting for me to stop again. And this time I might not leave. There's something about that place, about that voice, that doesn't belong to our world. And I've learned that some roads, no matter how familiar, can become doorways to places we're not meant to find. I sometimes wonder how many others have heard that voice, how many drivers have pulled over and never made it home. There are no missing posters, no headlines, no warnings, just silence. But maybe that's the point. Maybe the quiet is where it hides. And maybe, just maybe, the next time someone hears their name whispered from the woods, they won't be as lucky as I was. They'll listen. They'll answer. And the trees will close behind them, leaving no trace but the whispering wind.